I was meeting with a client last week, came into the office, says, my business is worth $5 million. I'm ready to sell. We had a conversation. One of the questions I asked him is, does your wife know that you want to sell? He got very quiet. What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, that's a classic example of business readiness versus personal readiness. There's actually two different assessments that we take clients through. Business readiness, is the business ready to be transferred to a new buyer? Are there standard operating procedures in place? Do you have a management team in place? Are clients working with the owner and the founder, or are they working more with that next sort of generation of relationship managers or sales professionals? And that's the business readiness. The personal readiness is often overlooked in this process by a lot, which is, hey, this is my life's work and I'm working 70, 80 hours a week in my business. What am I going to do when I don't have that responsibility on my time? Am I personally ready for that next chapter?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about a client that came in and we were going through that readiness. And I asked him the question just off the cuff, are you ready? What are you going to do? And his response was, I'm going to love it. I'm going to go spend time doing whatever I want to do and enjoy every minute of it. And distinctively, his wife turned to him and called him out and said, no, you're not. You're going to miss going to the office, the camaraderie, hanging out with the guys that you've been working with for 15, 20 years building the business, even though you own it. Be honest with yourself. You're going to be a wreck. And he was quiet. I think about that because how many clients do we meet with that are confident in their mind until we start walking them through what does that next step look like? That's a good example of where somebody thought he was ready, but we still had some more work to do there.
Yeah, it's a great example too of why we emphasize having both spouses in this process, because oftentimes in most families, there's one spouse that kind of takes over the financial responsibilities of the day to day, and then the other is handling some of the family dynamics or the other things that divide and conquer in the roles and responsibilities. But ultimately, why it's so important to have both spouses in the room is exactly what you just spoke to. I want to talk a little bit more, though, about attractiveness, business attractiveness. We talked a little bit about business readiness and personal readiness, but the other piece that I want to talk a little bit about is attractiveness. Some of the things that make businesses more attractive are really around the transferability of the business to that next owner. So things like, do I have a management team in place? Do I have concentration risk in my client base or my customer base? Or do I have no more than 5% of all of my sales concentrated to one customer or less? And those are the things that make businesses more attractive. And of course, the reverse is true. If you have 75% of your revenue coming from 3 clients or customers, all of the clients or customers work with the owner. You don't have that next generation of leaders in the organization, or there's no mid-level management in the company to run the day-to-day of it. That's where we see businesses' attractiveness scores really affect their value, because a buyer looks at that and says, well, they haven't invested back in the business properly. I'm going to be buying a job, or I'm going to have to hire all of these types of professionals that, even though, yes, the business might be profiting a 60% net margin, that business owner has not invested back into the company at all. And so I know I'm going to have to spend another 20 or 30% a year of these profits to go hire a management team, to go hire more salespeople, to go de-risk this business from an actual customer concentration risk perspective. Or maybe even the deal structure that I get is going to be pretty low because it's going to be highly contingent on those customers or clients staying on board. And there may be a lot of clawbacks or earnout type of structures on the deal structure. So the attractiveness piece is really paramount in going through this as well, to look at what are buyers really wanting here, and what would ultimately drive your valuation is making that business more attractive to a potential buyer to say, yeah, this is something that can transition easily as well as paying top dollar and getting to a really competitive bidding process throughout this.
Yeah, as you say that, what comes to mind is just like we had just talked about with a spouse, the question we ask a lot of clients: would you buy your business today knowing everything you know about it?
Mm.
When was the last time you took a good vacation where you weren't tied to the phone? And these types of conversations to where they can start to crystallize in their mind, maybe I have to shift things, put different procedures in place so it does become more attractive. So an outside party looking at it would want to buy it.
I think for those clients going through the readiness assessment, that the attractiveness assessment is going to give them clarity and confidence in all of those different aspects so that they know exactly what they need to do to get the business ready to sell. What are those drivers that are going to get them on the higher end of that range on the value gap based on the attractiveness scores that they ultimately get?
Is there a recent example that you can share with us where you've walked somebody through who came into the office, said, I'm ready to exit?
Actually, an example that I'll reference is a client that we're working with currently. They ended up being referred to us when they had already gotten an offer from a private equity firm to sell their business. What ultimately ended up happening is they signed what's called a letter of intent, or what we often refer to as an LOI, and they liked the number that was thrown out on the LOI. When the private equity firm, though, started going through their own attractiveness and own readiness assessments with them, what ended up happening is that the number that they ultimately threw out there was beat down so bad that the deal fell through. Ultimately, they didn't go through our process initially because they already had an offer on the table and we were really just focused on their personal financial planning. But after the deal fell apart, both clients came back, because there were two partners, and said, we actually want to go through your process. Seeing this deal blow up with private equity made us realize that there's probably some things that we really need to focus on with the business to make sure that the business is ready and attractive, so that when we do go back to market in the next several years, that we really focus on the things that will enhance the value when we do go ahead and get the business relisted again.
Yeah, what a common thing with private equity. And I think that something you mentioned there is critical. Who's buying the business? Is it private equity? Is it another local competitor? Most of our clients focus on EBITDA, but when you deal with private equity, they're looking at quality of earnings. And so when they start to understand who are your clients, how long have they been your client, do you have concentration, they start to reduce that number. So they kind of get you on the hook with that letter of intent, and then they start getting into it and they get you to the table and either you sign or you back away. So that's a great example of someone who had to back away, say, let's go back. We want to exit. Let's start doing some of these things that we need to do so that doesn't happen to us again. So that's a great example.
Yeah. So if you're watching this video and you're wondering, is my business ready? Am I personally ready? How attractive is this business to an outside buyer? Hop on our website at instrumentalwealth.com, schedule some time with one of our advisors. We'd love to have a deeper conversation with you around this topic and make sure that you leave this process with the clarity and confidence you need to make sure that you're maximizing your exit.